Everybody, and welcome to the Fireside Chat series, Tech Leaders in Focus, brought to you by Scalable Leaders. Now, the first thing I want to do is start with an Australian custom. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're on, and I would also like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, what's this Fireside Chat series about, and what can you expect from the next hour? Over the last few years, there's been a realization that the transition into leadership roles and growth as a leader in tech is harder than for other roles. The gap where our leadership skills are and where they need to be from the bridging the gap from individual contributor to leader is simply larger because as individual contributors in engineering, design, data, even product, we don't hone those interpersonal and leadership skills as much as people in, say, sales, marketing, or HR, which is really part of the core craft. So as a result, once we get into leadership roles, many of us feel stuck or overwhelmed. At Scalable Leaders, we focus on giving leaders that extra support to unlock their potential, fast-track their growth, and help them avoid the burnout. It's a support system that's designed to be the fastest way for leaders in tech to level up. Now, in this series of Fireside Chats with established leaders in our tech ecosystem, we want to demystify what the journey as a leader looks like, shine a light on common mistakes, and understand how leaders are managing the demands of their roles today. Whether you're catching us live or catching up afterwards, jot down your questions into the channel and we'll get around to them and answer them. Now, this one, we've got Dave Wang from Product Academy, ex-Linktree, ex-Head of Product Society One. Welcome, Dave. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to today in your role as a founder and in your last role as a group product manager at Linktree, and what the similarities are, but also how they're different day to day.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. First of all, huge fan of the work that you're doing. It's such a pleasure to be here and sharing what I've learned with others. And thank you for creating this platform as well. This is an amazing thing that you're doing for the community and also for the world.
Appreciate it, mate.
Pleasure. And also, by the way, just in China at the moment, so the internet could be a bit choppy, but I think we should be okay. They got 5G here as a backup on top of their Wi-Fi, which is kind of insane, but it's pretty good. But yeah, right now, what I'm doing is actually building Product Academy full time. So I founded Product Academy about 3-4 years ago now, and it's been gaining slow traction. And I think product it's basically there now. I've got a pretty good product, pretty good online course. So now I'm going to scale with the company and as a leader myself. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and tell us, so before you were, I think, very well recognized for being a group product manager at Linktree. How's that different? Being a founder, you just mentioned to me you've got a team as well that you're managing, to being an employee, and also as a founder focusing on obviously the whole business, and as a group product manager mostly just focusing on product. Tell us about those differences and how maybe what you learned from one about the other.
Yeah, it's such a good journey. Like, I don't think I will be able to build a business without being a group product manager or without being a product manager in general. Like, that quote from Steve Jobs that talks about like you can't, connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Like that's literally it. Like when I was working as a PM and as well as a group PM in Linktree, as well as a leader in other companies, the role becomes more ambiguous as the higher you go. So when I was a PM, it's like, oh, here's what we're doing. Great, let's build the product. And things are more clear and gives me a lot of ability to know the details and actually be really solid in what I'm doing. But as you get higher and higher, when I was at Group PM in Linktree, man, it was so ambiguous, the role, because the company was going through a big phase of change. And then there's so much new stuff happening, and sometimes there's like half a brief from the founder. It's like, hey, Dave, I've got this great idea. Let's go build it. And like, great, let's figure it out. And that type of managing ambiguity and setting up vision and understanding the commercial and how do we make money for this product, that really translates well when I'm building a business now. Like all the skills that I've learned sort of connecting now together. So it's great. And obviously there's lots to learn as well. So
I know there's this whole talk at the moment about like product management dead and Airbnb getting rid of it, and the guys from Dovetail, etc. And I just find it so funny because a lot of product functions that I've seen, while being a consultant, etc. Yeah, they're just very executional. And to be honest, every startup has a product manager, right? They're somewhere. They're probably a founder. Sometimes they're an engineer. Sometimes they're a designer. Someone is making decisions. Whether we have the role or not doesn't really like whether someone has the title is almost irrelevant. But I have always noticed that difference between product managers who've like only ever been employees and product managers who have been founders and have started something themselves, and they just think more commercial and think more holistic, and actually tend to be a little bit better with that ambiguity and don't ask so many questions of like, hey, well, how exactly do you want this to work? And I'm more like, well, actually, what are we trying to do as a business? Here's how I think it should work. So yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of synergies between them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to add to that as well. Like, I think dealing with ambiguity is going to be a very normal thing as you become a leader in any aspect. Like, even if you become like a CEO of like Disney, right? Like Bob is going to be dealing with lots of different ambiguity. So the higher you go, the more ambiguous it gets. So you might as well get used to it now.
Yeah, I mean, he and Steve Jobs had the experience of setting up a company, then seeing someone else sort of mess it up, and then having to come back and clean it up. So that's always good fun. Yeah. Okay. So how did you get to where you are as a leader today? I mean, it's been a long journey, but sort of explain that to us from like the first time you were picked as a leader to today. What was sort of the key milestones and lessons learned?
Yeah. Like maybe let's work backwards from that. Like my first official head of product role was at Society One, where I was working under a really smart CTO. His name is Simon, and he founded another company as well. And he's actually working at another company now, a pretty big scale up called Forage, and it's like a massive, pretty big. And he's like, really, really smart guy. So he gave me a chance to be a head of product there and a leader and leading a small team. So we had a PM there, got a designer there, about a small team, about 20 engineers. But I think the reason why he gave me the opportunity and the shot to take the title up is because I was ready before I even got the title. So even before that, I was already teaching a general assembly. I was coaching and mentoring people and honing on my skills of how do you teach people and lead people without telling them what to do, and listing it out for them. And that I have to learn. And again, a lot of mistakes there, like early on when I was like an early coach or mentor, I would just tell people what to do. Like, hey, here's a framework, follow it. But what I've learned throughout the journey in GA is actually, well, just let people go and explore. And then when they come back, they will learn a lot faster. And then they retain a lot more information. So just letting go. I think I was learned a lot from GA. And also on the business side as well, I was sort of ready from a business acumen perspective because I've always run businesses on the side. I just don't promote it that much on LinkedIn because it gets confusing. But I run like a light bulb business and also ran a marketplace for tutors, for those who was following my journey a couple of years ago with Raj and Roger and a bunch of people. And that brought me a lot of business acumen and really understanding, well, why would people give me money to build my team in the first place? Oh, that's right. We need to make money back for the business. So let's build a business case, right? Let's justify why do we need these resources, or why we're building this, and where are we going in the future? So I think having those sides, are just very lucky to have stumbled into the coaching aspect as well as the business side. And that's my first role as head of product at S1. The stars just sort of connected.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, right? You were in many ways a founder, but also an instructor first, and then became a leader. And I wanted to ask you about this because you and I have both been teaching at General Assembly and done like various other things before, where someone else then picked us as a leader. What would you say you learned from being a teacher, and how did like teaching make you a better leader? You already mentioned sort of like letting people explore first, make their own mistakes, and then come back and sort of trust you. And but are there more overlaps between those skills, you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like like how I landed into this thinking around let people just go their own path and learn through their own way, and letting go is because I realized when I was teaching at GA, we had different levels of people that come through the course. So you might have someone who's like completely have no idea about product management. That's one thing. And there's someone that's already like a senior product manager. The company sent them there. They just don't want to take. They literally just want to take a week off and just relax. Right? That's that's why they're there. They just cruise through the course. And then there's people, the founders, who just like, oh, I'm hiring a product manager, or I am the product manager. I just want to learn the skills. So what I realized is that, well, learning something, there's multiple different levels of abilities. And as a leader, when I'm managing a team, I also think about from that perspective too. And there's a Japanese quote called, I forgot what it's going to be, Hikari. I think it's called Hikari. For those who's watching live, go Google this. But basically what he's saying is that when you're teaching something, there are people that is just going to copy what you do. And there's people that's going to take what you do and change it for themselves. And there's going to be people that is literally the master and they're creating a new style of Kung Fu and they're just using you as an input. So just being aware of that in a team environment, has been super helpful for me to just be able to help people and also just connect with people much, much easier, and also help them with their goals.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like we're leading the class of like 20 people, and we still have so many different levels that we need to adjust to. And you have that the same, when you inherit a team, or even when you're building a team, everyone's going to be a little bit different. You need to know how to utilize them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And just speaking of GA, by the way, you actually taught my partner Pam. I was just talking to Pam around like, oh, I'm going to jump on a call with Ben. She's like, oh, Ben, oh yeah. So my partner Pam is also a product manager. She's head of product now, and she learned from Ben, by the way. So, so Ben is like the OG of the GA.
I'm not sure about that, but you're very kind. And I mean, Pam has been fantastic in the course, and I think what I learned in those courses is very hard, even as a leader, to make someone successful if they. Even if they're doing the course, right, or if they're reading up, if it's just not what they're trying to do, is just not their talent, it's just not their like natural habitat, if you like, it's really, really hard, right? So I think Pam has done very, very well for herself. But that brings up another question of us to discuss later, right? On growing as a leader, and I've always maintained, despite everything I've just said, because I've seen it in myself and a lot of other people, that absolutely leaders are made, they're not born. It just and it's just because there's so many different like styles of leadership, right? Whereas a product manager, or doing a specific task, it's really just about that, but it's a little bit more narrow. But as a leader, you've got so many different ways in which you can lead. So let's jump into that for you. In fact, who was a leader, like early in your journey? Who was a leader that inspired you, or like that you tried to, like something they did that you tried to incorporate into your own leadership style?
I think, absolutely agree with the point you mentioned, like leaders are made and they're not born. And I thought a lot around this as well, because as a teacher, I think about, well, how can I teach these leadership skills to people? And I'm still trying to crack that, by the way. I'm not as well as versed in that leadership craft as you are. But I did think a lot about like, well, what are the product management skills? Like, are product managers born or are they made? Well, I found that like the environment that you're in is actually controls a lot about how you are as a person. And I think leadership comes from within. If you come from a good environment and have some good mentors and have some good coaches and have some good people, you can actually have a better starting ground than most people. But that doesn't mean that you stop from there and that's like, you're on a good pedestal, but you have a good starting ground. And I try to mimic that type of environment for myself and also for my students that come to Product Academy, so that they have access to me and other people too. So one person that really inspired me early on was actually, I was reading Richard Branson's book back in the days. When I was small, I would just go to the library all the time, and I would just act. And one day I was so involved into like magic tricks and stuff, so I was getting like library magic books. And then someone shoved like a Richard Branson book into the wrong aisle. I'm like, oh, okay, what is this thing called Virgin? I'm like, oh, hello. And I picked it up. And then I bought, and I rented a book in the library for those who aren't my age. Like, library is a place you get to rent books. And I picked it up, and he talked about his fascinating life around like how his parents were just, let him do his own thing when he was young. There's one story that's still stuck in my mind was, Richard used to go out with his parents, and then he would be really naughty and go out and he would try to, he would go on a trek, and then he would just go and just go to the side roads and explore different areas, while his parents would just go straight and just follow the route. And he would used to do that when he's small. And one day he got lost. He strayed away from the path too much, and he got lost, and the parents couldn't find him. But the parents, instead of them shouting and say, hey, Richard, where are you? What they did was like, they say, hey, Rich, can you make your own way back to home? And the parents kept going. And he'd mentioned that, well, through that learning of him just trying to find his own way home, that was something that helped him grow as a leader of dealing with unknown situations, especially in such a young kid. And he's like realized that, well, actually, like 99% of the time, bad things don't happen. Like, it's really about 1% of the time that do. Would you not want to do something because of that 1%? Or would you want to do something so you have 99% chance of succeeding? So, and that lesson really stuck into my mind, which is like, take the path less taken. It's going to be okay, because you're always going to end up there. And I think that's why Richard Branson is such a crazy guy himself. So yeah, that's the first leader that really, really influenced me. Just think outside the box.
That's awesome.
Don't be afraid to go straight outside from the path.
Yeah, it's like this very entrepreneurial kind of trait, and that I think a lot of employers actually, it's a double-edged sword. You can take it too far, but a lot of employers actually value that. And I remember there was a video recently from Barack Obama talking about like, what kind of person he would hire, like, skills and traits that he would want to recommend for younger people. And he's like, well, the guy who sits in a meeting and is not complaining about, well, here's all the reasons why this can't work, but is like, let me take care of that. I will find a way, or I know how to do this. That's something that employers and leaders themselves will always value. And I think that's how you show your potential as well as a leader, saying like, no, actually, I think I've got a path here. Let me do this. Showing that initiative, showing that confidence. There's a lot in it. So yeah, I think there's a lot in the story that you just told.
Yeah.
Okay, so Richard Branson, cool. And so in your early leadership journey, you already mentioned a few things that you picked up, sort of teaching people and letting them make their own mistakes. What else did I forgot his name now, the founder of Society One. What else did he see in you, and what did you find like you were actually doing pretty well early on, compared to other leaders that you got positive recognition for?
I think there are two things that I do very well. And I think by the time I actually met Simon, I was already fairly further down in my career already. So I was sort of like, I already made a few mistakes. So I think there's two things that I've found it that's unique for myself is, first thing is I have ability to really craft vision and just get people to follow it. And I like to solve heartfelt problems for the products and the companies that I create. Like, for example, breaking into product management is such a hard problem to solve. It's so hard, and it's such an emotional problem. And for example, like the reason why I decided to quit my job and just give up everything and focus on this is because I was coaching someone that came from Pakistan, fresh off Pakistan, is doing well country, by the way, as a PM, comes to Australia, and he had to basically start as like, he's a senior person, and now he's coming back, he's like struggling to get a product owner role. And he's like, that's tough. That's really tough. I'm like, yeah, because like the style of Kung Fu is very different here, but that's okay. Like, let's work together. And I worked with him and I coached him. He'd done my courses and we learned a lot. And basically within 6 months' time, he got a role as a PM. and he's living by himself in Sydney, like a 1-bedroom apartment, just hiring. And then like 6 months later, he calls me and we had a chat. He's like, Dave, like, I got a new role now. I got a pay rise. Now I'm going to get my partner who's from Pakistan to come over to Australia with us now because I got the role and because of you, because you helped me achieve that, what I want to get to in Australia. And I was so emotional because like really like getting someone's family over here. And now he's moved to Melbourne now. He left Sydney, moved to Melbourne now with his family doing extremely well. He's now as a senior PM. And I think that's why I built Product Academy. And I think that's what the vision, that's what I'm really good at, is just thinking about solving heartfelt problems for people and setting a vision and bringing people on this journey. And when I tell this vision to a lot of people I work with too, like absolutely. Like who wouldn't want to come and change people's lives? And I'm not doing it because for marketing's sake, but what we're doing at PA is literally life changing for a lot of people around the world. So I think I just got that very unique ability to do that. And I try to stay away from businesses that are very sort of like missionary driven. I mean, there is a time and place for missionary company like, Microsoft, big mammoth machine, sales, marketing, distributed. Great. $1 trillion company itself. That's great. And there's companies like Apple who's just there, just like, we just make good products. That's all we do. All right. And the sales and marketing come after. So I think that's what I'm good at. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is also ability to not just solving a heartfelt problem and doing good for the world, but also coming from a commercial mindset as well. Like I'm very, what's the word? Contrarian in the view that I do see money as a fuel to fuel a vision. Like there is like the non-profit way of solving world problems, and there is the capitalist way of solving the world problem. I'm sort of tilting towards the capitalist way because I think when you create value for the people will give you money, and that will continue to sustain that vision. And that's a more longer term plan rather than going for a non-profit route, which is very hard. So as a result, it forces me to think about when I'm leading a team, forces me to justify the value for my team. Like, why do we exist in the first place? How much money are we generating for the business or saving for the business, and make it tangible. And so I do a lot of spreadsheet work. I get into a lot of business casing and do a lot of TAM work. So I think that's what makes me unique. And I think that's what people appreciate when they hire me and when they work with me. It's just, they know that, hey, look, when we have Dave, we can build a pretty good business here and people will follow him as a result.
You're going to make good decisions for the business. There's really two really interesting things in what you just mentioned. The first one is so your strength to build a vision. Funny enough, and I didn't plan this, last week when we were talking to Cheryl, she said she loves working with people who have a vision because it's just not her strength, right? Whereas for you, that's a strength that you can bring with you, and I'm sure we can get into that in a second. There's other things that are a strength of one leader that are just not of another, and so this to me shows that, funny enough, just like in product, right? Depending on the role, your strengths either shine or your weaknesses shine, right? And you can there's so many different ways of being a leader, and it just has to fit into the context that you're in. And just like with product managers, right? The senior guy that you had, he was probably great in the context that he was in. And I love your analogy with, well, we just have a different kung fu here in terms of probably not just product, but also how we interview and how a CV needs to be presented and all that sort of stuff, right? Once you change the context, it's an uphill battle again.
Absolutely.
And I we were talking about this last week as well. Like when you change countries and continents and don't have that support network anymore, and like have to adjust to a new culture, etc. It's another load on you as a leader and as a person. It's another skill that you have to learn how to succeed in that context as opposed to another. And often I find we don't acknowledge that enough for all the, especially in Australia where we have a huge number of immigrants, especially in tech. The additional load on them when we hire them from overseas, or even when they've been here for a couple of years, it's still there, and it's harder for them.
Absolutely. Like I really believe that like my vision for Product Academy is I want to create a world where opportunity has got no boundaries, because like that's absolutely what I really is sacrificing my life to do. And in fact, by the way, I am going to experience that because I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to go to Seattle. I'm going to start again. I really want to live through this journey and really just understand it and experience it and build a product category there, because that's the best way for you to really learn and understand like what goes on. Like, and coming back to like when we come to talent around the world, Australia has a very limited amount of talent pool, because that's how many people we have. We've got 26 million people. The most amount of product managers we can get is probably 26 million, right? But right, that's just like that's literally it, right? But if you look outside,
theoretical maximum,
we have 6 billion people around the world, right? Like there is so much amazing talent around the world that we can come and bring into Australia. As well as training our own and doing what's really good for our own economy. But you got to look in both sides. It's like great, we have great product people here, but as well as we can actually get really great people that's already working as PM around outside of the country. And we just need to adapt to the Australian style of Kung Fu, pick up some Aussie slangs, right? And they will do amazingly.
The other thing you already mentioned, and I know this is a big part of your purpose behind Product Academy, is and it often doesn't even get talked about. Wherever you read about leadership, it's about that individual leader succeeding, but the impact that we have on the livelihoods, financial situation, personal well-being, future connections, and career as leaders on the people who report to us is tremendous. And I don't see a lot of leaders sort of having that in the back of their mind when they're leading their team every day. But it's there. And I think HR teams often see that in the way they approach leadership selection and development, sort of has in mind that, well, we need to make sure that there's at least psychological safety and like the well-being of our people is important, because they understand the science of how that leads to better performance and a more resilient business. But I think I found a lot of leaders that sort of get it, also feeling, an additional level of pressure, and at some stage, seen a few of them opt out of being a leader because of the additional stress that they're experiencing because of that responsibility. And I've always wished that there was a little bit more help for that. One of the things that's sort of a recurring pattern there is also the hardest decisions often that people have to make is when it comes to redundancies or letting people go, because they know of the impact in that situation it will have potentially on another person, especially in a down market like we're seeing right now for tech. What was your sort of like the hardest decision that you had to make early on in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think restructuring a team and letting people go is like the hardest thing that you can do. I don't think any leader will say otherwise. And I thought a lot about why is this such a hard decision? Besides, yes, you have a knock-on impact on people's lives, and besides, like there's a lot of anxiety that you cause for other people. Absolutely, that's a very hard decision, and morally, it's the wrong thing to do. But objectively, it's the right thing to do for the business. But on the other hand, I think about, well, what can I do as a leader to make sure this doesn't happen again in the future? Because we can see this happens every 10 years, right? Every 10 years there's a recession, every 10 years there's a mass layoff, right? It just happens. And I think it comes down to, as a leader, I hold myself very high with the decisions that I make. And I call this decision quality. And I teach my team this as well. Like, we don't have to make a lot of decisions. We just have to make good quality decisions. And quality decisions comes from really hard trade-offs. For example, when I hire a team, I don't just ask for the team members first. I actually spend a lot of time understanding the strategy, the budget, what are we doing, how can we achieve the goal so we can justify the salary for my team and the people that we hire, and sort of like work backwards from that. And then we go out and hire or promote internally. So the hardest thing, that the decision that I made was I've made this decision where we were scaling a Linktree And then it was crazy. We just raised like $100 million, right? And one of the team members comes to us and be like, hey, we're going to hire a lot of people. Here's a spreadsheet, fill out with people that you want to hire. I'm like, this is counterintuitive. This is not how I usually hire people. I actually get a lot more scrutiny from this. But nonetheless, I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just like, maybe I just don't know how to do things. So I just fill out the spreadsheet with the people I want to hire. And then we hired a bunch of people. And then, as you know, the downturn comes. We have to have the conversation with people and let a lot of people go. That's very tough. Like, there is nothing easier than knowing that you just, like, basically ruin someone's life for the next 3 months, because it's not. And then as a leader, you got to think about, well, how can I help them? How can we help this person transition? And I think that comes down to you as a leader to do that. There is 2 ways you can do this. There's one way you can blame the company, you can blame HR, you can be like, yep, I'm so sorry, we're letting go people. And then that's it. Or like the approach that I took and with the team is like, okay, cool, let me tap into my network. And I actually message every single person. And for those I've spammed on LinkedIn, I'm so sorry. Like, that's the reason I spammed people, is because I actually messaged them personally and be like, hey, we've got this really amazing people. Like, please hire this person. And Linktree's put together a very nice spreadsheet. Like, Linktree's done an amazing job at that. Like, big notion with all the amazing people, and we've got a good network of supporting groups as well to help our teams find another role. And I think, these bad, hard decisions has to be made, but it's about how do we manage it as a leader? How do we take care of the people? Just so in the long run, you can still live with yourself. And whenever there is an upturn, which is inevitably there will be an upturn, these people will come back and they want to promote Linktree, and or other company, not just Linktree, like with Society, every other company, and they want to work for you again. And I think that's the difference between a good leader and everyone else.
I think it's very easy as a leader to find a narrative where you can wipe your hands of it, but at the end of the day, you stood there in the interviews and said you want them to join you, and you were part of that hiring process, and you had the responsibility over them. I agree with the approach of at least trying what you can to help them land on their feet, and I found when you do that, it leads to so much more loyalty later on of people, and bunch of people I had to let go over the years. I'm still friends with, and we help each other out, because I think I can say that I always manage that with a lot of respect and for their situation and for their livelihood. That it's led to a lot of loyalty, and I'm very grateful for that.
Absolutely.
Now, were there early on? You already mentioned you've made a bunch of mistakes before you were put into that leadership position, but growth as a leader never stops. It's a lifelong journey, right? So, are there any mistakes that you've made sort of early on in your journey that if you reflecting on now, you're like, oh gee, I should have known better. I could have known better. I wish I would have known better. Tell us about that.
Yeah, all the time. I make mistakes all the time. Like, just before I left Linktree, I've made this massive mistake of actually just promised my stakeholders one thing and then just committed my team to it without even asking my team. Like, that's a big thing. And I know in theory I shouldn't do that, but like, when you're in the situation and the context and everyone's pushing you, you just make these mistakes, right? And I think as leaders, we just have to be responsible for the decisions that we make. Like, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake, as long as you're responsible for it and you take care of it and you make sure it doesn't happen again. That's okay, and that's what makes great leaders. And that's why I talk about these quality decisions. And I don't make a lot of decisions, but when I do, I make sure they are quality. So, because I know if I'm going to hold myself accountable for that decision that was made wrong, I can come back to it and be like, okay, it's my fault. So I think that. Sorry, I was going to jump into and talk about but you can.
No, I was just going to acknowledge I've been in that situation myself, and it's the right thing for the business, and you should check back with your team, and sometimes you don't, and there's a risk that there's backlash, right? And then you have this sort of double pressure. You've already committed yourself, you've committed to your manager, to your peers, and so now you got to convince your team, and yeah, it's one of these things that's just the constant stress and pressure that leaders experience, the pressure to make that call right then and there and ASAP, and at the same time to treat our team right and treat them like adults and having an impact. And it's hard. So and I think every leader has been there, except maybe some that don't really think about their team, like about their team as adults and having an opinion as well, a valid opinion.
Yeah. And like also a lot of the time, the leaders that you get the decision from, and they're not bad people either. They probably get the same pressure from the board, right?
Yeah.
And the board gets it from the investors. The investors gets it from the company that they work for. Like everyone's got some sort of pressure coming down.
Yeah.
And there's always times where you've got to make a bad decision, be like, okay, let's do it. And that's perfectly fine. But I think sometimes you have to own it. Just own the decision. Like you made something bad.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, my fault, and I would actually help us rectify it.
Yeah. And constantly flip-flopping between things and or blaming others ultimately isn't going to get you far either.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, sometimes you need to own it, and you might have to own a decision that you're not necessarily a fan of yourself, but if you're playing a two-faced game, one face to your team and one face to the people up, ultimately, I mean, you're splitting your personality and you have to do a whole lot of acting, but also it's going to come out sooner or later. So it's stressful.
I think there's a quote that says one little tinder takes 3 pieces of cloth to wrap it up. So if you're going to play two face or two sides, you got to think about 3 reasons or 3 excuses to justify for yourself and for your team and for your stakeholders. And you can see that it compounds very quickly and become unmanageable. So I try not to do that.
So it's exactly these kind of situations, the hard decisions, the things that can be quite risky as mistakes, is sort of that I found so many people struggle with, and it's why scalable leaders exist, right? And so what we ultimately are doing is sort of creating that support system for leaders, whether they're new leaders or whether they've been established for a while but are still sort of struggling with the stress and overwhelm of that role. And so one of the core pillars of the program is actually sandbox sessions where people can talk through the challenges, talk through tough decisions in a safe environment, and hopefully bypass the mistakes that are sort of hard to come back from. And also they get 24/7 support, like on Stack Overflow, which is going to resonate with the engineers. And whenever, like whether you're coming out of a stressful meeting and you're crying at the toilet, or whether you're having a shower in the morning, it's like, hold on, yesterday there was the situation and I'm not sure about this anymore. That's sort of what that is for. And we've got a playbook as well to actually help these tough decisions with some just like key principles. And I found a lot of people sort of, once they understand the core principles of leadership, the hard decisions come a lot easier, but it's just not really taught anywhere. And so we put this program, the system together with people who've worked in leadership positions at Google and Atlassian, Culture, Central, a couple of executive coaches, and one of them was actually recently named a global top 100 HR leader. So very proud for her. And so one of the things that if you're on the call, if you want to explore that, you can get from us for free, no strings attached, is actually to work out a strategy for you as a leader, because I found the strategy of how you grow and how you ultimately rise to these challenges is going to be key, because otherwise you're not, like, that overwhelm and that additional stress as a leader is ultimately going to take you fall victim to that, and there's not really a need for that. And so over to you, Dave. How do you manage, like, leadership is inherently stressful, right? And we've got pros and cons as leaders, and situations we deal with better and not so well. How do you manage the demands of the role, both as an employee, but also as a founder, where that stress, ultimately the buck really stops with you, right? And the pressure you put on yourself for the livelihoods of people that are impacted. How do you manage the demands of that?
It's not easy, but then nothing good is ever easy. And when it's easy, probably doing the same thing as everyone else is doing it, and you're probably not adding much value. So I think if you want to be a good leader, it's a very stressful role. And as much as people say it is stressful, it's stressful because you're dealing with two of the hardest decision leveraged out there. One thing is people leverage. Like you have to work through people. You can't be the owner of, you're not a solo person anymore. And leveraging people is the hardest thing because you're dealing with livelihood, moods, people's directions, like money as well from a salary perspective. Like that's hard and it's tough. And the second piece of leverage that's very hard is actually money leverage. Like how do you figure out, how do you get money and invest into good areas for the business so they continue to grow? That's literally like Wall Street, right? Like these two of the hardest thing that you got to do as a leader. It's a stressful job, but just have to recognize that these are the two key things, and knowing it is a very good first step for you to identify what decisions I need to make right now. So the way that I manage it is I really think through. I spend a lot of time in the morning. Like this morning, I spend like probably at least 45 minutes just thinking through like what am I going to do through a day. And I do that at night before I sleep for 15 minutes. I've got a to-do list just on notes, very simple. What are 3 things I want to do? Chuck it out. And then the next day when I wake up, I just think through like, hey, is this a few things? Cool. And I would just take my time in the morning. And that's usually my gym sessions, or take a walk, or just sit down and just think. That really helps me de-stress because I come back into quality decisions and then look at, out of the 3 things I need to do, what are the 3 quality decisions I need to make from this? And then we can move forward. So that's the thing, just think through things. And I think the second thing is absolutely what Cheryl mentioned, like exercise, meditate, like this really helps. Exercise creates like hormones in your body that makes you feel a lot more happier. So that's extremely, really, really helpful. Meditation helps you to be more mindful. So you can pick up those crazy thoughts that come to your mind and be like, oh, when a project's running late, someone's come to you like, hey, Dave, we just like this product's not going to launch for this quarter. It's going to launch next quarter. You're not triggered. You actually say, cool, all right, cool. Well, what's the situation here? Like, how can we make sure, to hit the date? If we can't, what can we move? And meditation helps with that completely. And I think the third thing is really tapping into like what is the good that you're doing for another human being. That's really what keeps me sane. Just pick those little things, like whether you're just helping someone answer a question, or just helping your team, just doing something good for a human. Those are the 4 things.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And just online, everybody, we're going to open it up to questions in a second. So chuck them into the channel if you have any. Otherwise, I've got plenty more, and we can keep going for the next 3 hours. Dave's always really generous to share, so take advantage of that. Just a quick reminder: if you want some help with any of your leadership challenges, go to scalableleaders.com/call, and I'm very happy to help and set up the time for us. Now, Dave, what is the best advice you have for emerging leaders, like the ones that either want to make that step sort of over the next 6 to 12 months, or have made it over the last like 1 or 2 years and are still, they might have had their first performance review, but it's still reasonably early in their journey. What would you recommend?
I would say leadership is not a job. Leadership is what you become as a result of the things that you do. So the first advice is like, just do it. Like for example, before I got the role as head of product, I was already coaching people and mentoring people through General Assembly. I was already building businesses. I was already doing that. Like, don't chase for the vanity things, because most people are chasing for vanity, and vanity never scales as a leader, right?
Yeah.
Always do the things that are what the title gives you. So if you want to become a great leader, coach people, mentor people. That's the growth side of things. Second thing is learn how to build a strong business case, and learn how to build a strong business through understanding the commercial side, as well as sales and marketing, and getting your product out there and talking to people. Build side businesses, do side projects, do the workshops that Ben is running, and use those as a learning loop for you to learn as quickly as you can. Do that. and then the title would come, and then the salary and the money would come, and then the leverage and influence would come. And I say that to every leader, like don't focus on that, focus on the skills.
Yeah, it's interesting, hey? Like one of the analogies I run in like the master classes and the programs is when you want to be a rock star, right? You first learn an instrument, right? And get into a practice room and get a teacher and like actually learn the frameworks and everything. So it like the process, and I think we found this as in product as well as in leadership, the process of engaging in like becoming a better leader is just lots of practice, lots of feedback loops, and just trying to do it, or at least having dry runs. And like if we think of like athletes, right? Sure, the glorious moments is when you're out there in the arena, when you're fighting it, when you're winning, but 99% of the time is spent in the practice room, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you become world class. And so unfortunately, in a lot of companies, they might do a quarterly or maybe an annual sort of leadership development day, and that's great. But also that means most of the things you're doing as a leader are happening in production. It can be, that's where the mistakes are the most costly. So I typically recommend against that. So it sounds like we're on the same page.
Absolutely.
Now we do have a question from.
Can I just add to that as well, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Just really quickly before we answer a question from Kurt. And hello, Kurt, by the way. So just want to add to that. The second question that people always follow up with is like, okay, well, how long that's going to take, right, to learn these skills, right? And I would say don't think about how long. Think about what are you willing to sacrifice as a result to become a good leader. Because just when Ben mentioned, those hours that you're spending practicing, you're not going to going out with friends. You're not going to be spending it going to watch movies. So the question is not how long, is what are you willing to give up and sacrifice to achieve this as well. So just want to add to that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Actually, it is a dedication learning the skill and becoming a better leader, and you're really gonna feel it once you are in the role, and once the demands are sort of piling on. The thing I found there is in tech in particular, right, and that's why I believe we need extra support. We like when you're an engineer, for example, you can't suddenly give up on being a good engineer and learning about new frameworks and technologies and everything, but you also need to start being a good leader, right? So you have this double load suddenly of like, well, gee, I need to become a better leader and still hone my core craft, and so that's one of the things that's a little bit unfair to people in tech, and it's why I believe we don't really see many like CTOs and CPOs become become CEOs, just because that gap to then also separately build up the commercial skills later on that's also there it's just so much bigger and harder on us. Now, Kurt, all right, so what's your view on EQ and street smartness required for being a successful product leader?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, you got to be emotionally tuned, right? Which is what EQ stands for. Emotional quotient. I forgot what Q stands for. But you got to be emotionally in tune with others. Absolutely. I think as a leader, that just takes time for you to build up. The more people you interact with, the more people you work with, the more signals that you're going to get from different people, and then you will be able to learn that. Something that really helps me done well is there's a website called 16 Personalities. So I go in there and do my own personality test, but it allows you to get a really nice infographic of the different personalities that you work with. They're never 100% like all framework are, but it gives you a good starting point. So understanding how humans work. And there's a Chinese word called 人性. It's actually ingrained into our culture, which means understanding how humans work. And that is so important as a leader, because everything you do go through people. You got to have to go through people leverage. So absolutely, so important.
Yeah, I'd second that. I mean, EQ is important. The thing I learned recently, actually, from Shane Assad, who's a UX designer at Qantas and studying psychology on the side, because why not, is that there's actually, when it comes to empathy, a big part of EQ, right? There's actually 3 different types of empathy. and everyone is sort of like stronger or weaker at certain things. And so I found that there's often a misconception that some neurodivergent individuals are like, they're not necessarily great at reading a room, and arguably that's a trait that's helpful as a leader. Although when you can complement yourself with the right team members, then it's not necessarily essential. But the other empathy are, actually responding to how someone is feeling and showing them that you care. And most people are pretty good at most neurotypical people are pretty good at that, and neurodivergent individuals not so good. And then there's a type of empathy where you know exactly how to influence someone and how to like wash their brain towards certain things. And it's funny because that's obviously a trait that we value in leaders, but it's also a trait that's highly associated, like where the psychopaths tend to do the best in this area, which is probably why we have so many psychopaths as CEOs and companies and as leaders to some extent. But it's just without the other parts of the empathy where you actually do feel something for the other person when they're in trouble, it can be so toxic for the organization. I think most of us on the call probably would have experienced that. So it's interesting, Kurt. I think it's really important, but also you can complement yourself, and there can be too much of a good thing in there as well.
Well, I think ability to work through people is a power that you have. So it's about how you utilize the power, right? So you can be a psychopath and use that power, or you can be a great person and use that power. Like
indeed.
It doesn't matter. It's like great power comes with great responsibilities.
Yeah, indeed. Now we've got a question from Pragati here, and I can't show it on the screen so that the technology is letting us down here, but I'm going to read it out. And it's related to I think your earlier story about product manager from overseas. So Pragati is asking, what would be your advice for new immigrant PMs to rise to a product leader position? I assume the question is here in Australia. And she's noticed that it's just hard to gain enough trust, and people are less willing to take a bet on you. Any thoughts, Dave?
First of all, it's hard. I just want to empathize with this. It's extremely hard. It's not easy. It's not an easy journey, but the journey is worth it at the end, in the long run. So like the reality of any location change is that you have to build your own network again. You have to build your own brand again. You have to build everything from scratch again. But that's okay, because you have really great foundations that help you move through this progress a lot faster, right? It doesn't mean you start from scratch and you spend the same amount of time that you did back in your country. It doesn't mean that. You have to go through these stages. You have to build up the trust. You have to do these things, but you do it much, much faster because you just know how to deal with people much quicker. Like the EQ question that Kurt mentioned, right? You don't have to learn that from them. So the milestones are the same, but if you have the right experience, you will go through it faster. And I think there's 3 things I would suggest. Get a good mentor to help you navigate through this journey. Get someone to help you. Second thing is go to networking and meet other people so you can get exposure. And the third thing is I do recommend reading some of the Western style philosophy around product management. So people like Marty Kagan, Melissa Perry, all these Western style product management, as opposed to like Indian or Chinese style. Understand that perspective, and that will help you relate to others much, much easier. And the rest is just time in the game, in the practice room, just showing up, and guarantee you'll get there.
And I think just to acknowledge that right now is also the toughest, I think, market for product managers, or generally in tech, that I think I've ever seen in Australia. So it can take a little longer, and I've seen a couple of people being open to moving elsewhere in Australia, Sunshine Coast or Adelaide or other places where they have great tech companies and not as much talent as we've got here in Sydney, even though it still feels really restrictive in Sydney at times. Fingers crossed that it works out sooner rather than later. Now, we've got a question. We've got a question here from Teresa. What's your advice on how to positively influence?
That's just like positive reinforcement. I think it comes out to your own values as a leader. Like That's my perspective, by the way. I am very values-driven person. I actually write my values down on a piece of paper, and I get stuck into my wall, and
Mm,
I pick up values from different people, and values are the things that you judge yourself on when no one's looking, right? And so it comes back to like being positive. Like, how do you positively influence people? You must have positive values to begin with. So when you make those decisions or have those conversations or say or pick particular words that you use and influence others, it comes from those perspectives and those values. So I would say that's my biggest advice. Like, just write down, what do you believe in, what are the good things, and if you don't have your own values to start from, that's okay, just copy someone else's. And then over time, over a period of 3 to 5 years, you'll be able to hone in, you have your own values. But if you don't make the journey
mm,
now, you should start. I think that's probably my first advice.
yeah.
Yeah, there's other
I
techniques
think
as well, but I won't get into that. Yeah.
I think you've alluded to that with the values, but I think, and a lot of other things that you said, it's so inherent, I think, to your approach. But I think what's really important there is also to create explicitly, to call it out, a psychologically safe environment, right? Where your the way you influence and the way you work with your team and with your stakeholders is
Cool.
just really based on trust and them knowing that you want the best for them, and that there's no punishment if they don't follow, if they don't get it right, if they and that actually speaking their mind and maybe challenging some things is a good thing. And I found when you can have that open discussion and where opinions are heard, it's actually there tends to be at the end a lot more buy-in, rather than people saying like, all right, well, begrudgingly I'll do this, but I'll reserve my right to tell people I told you so, right? Or to tell them, well, you didn't listen to me, so of course we're getting here. When people are part of that discussion and the feedback loop, when you can have that conversation, and you can sometimes agree to disagree but still commit, then I found there's a lot more buy-in, and people tend to want to do a lot better for you as a leader because at least they were part of the conversation. Not saying that's 100% the case. I've seen the opposite as well. I've had very honest and straightforward conversations with someone, and they ended up working against me. That's what happens. Everyone is a bit individual. Every situation is a bit unique.
Yeah, and I think.
Alrighty.
Sorry, you go. I think that's.
Now, please, you're my guest. Please go.
Oh, just to add to that as well. Yeah, Ben touched on trust. Yeah, so trust and respect are the two things that you can't buy with money. So to really positively influence others, you have to be in a game with them. That means you have to do the work with the team. Just be there. Just time in game. That's the only way to build trust and respect and influence.
Yeah. Now we do have a lot more questions here, and hopefully from Kurt in particular, we can get around to them offline, because we do have to wrap it up. I know there's some people who probably have a 1 p.m. So thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for spending the last hour with us. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about Product Academy, or any announcements you've got? I mean, you already shared the world exclusive right here, but you're moving to the US. Anything else on your mind?
So yeah, one of the vision that I have is for Product Academy is to create a world where opportunities got no boundaries. And Product Academy, I really want to go to the States and really build and understand from that perspective, how does product work, and bring it back to the community here. So I'll be moving there next year. It's like an announcement. I should have done it, but do that. But the second thing is, keep in touch with Product Academy. I'll be doing a lot more interesting stuff in there when I am overseas. I'll be creating unique content of how do you break into PM in the States as you're moving into overseas, as well as coming up with workshops and courses. So check out Product Academy, and we can stay in touch there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining, everybody. It's really your curiosity and dedication to mastering leadership that's going to be a huge asset to not just yourselves, but really our whole ecosystem. So thank you. Our next Fireside Chat will be next Tuesday, same time, same place. Well, not same place, slightly different link. I'll put it in the comments, with Harry Waiputra, who is CPO at High Pages, and actually recently, until recently, was CPO, CTO at High Pages, and has been at a number of high-profile business. It's a really awesome guy. So I look forward to that one. Lots to be learned. And if there's a leader that you want to hear from in these fireside chats, this is about highlighting awesome leaders from the community. Mention them in the comments so I can get in touch with them, or let me know otherwise. And yeah, if you run into any challenges as a leader in your journey or for growth, do reach out, scalableleaders.com/call. No strings attached. We're going to make it a free session about you and your goals and how you can get there. That's it, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully I see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye all.